Hello, my name is Dejan Bojkov, Grandmaster from Bulgaria. In this clip, I'm going to show you typical ideas of how to attack when you bring your heavy pieces in front of the pawns. These are the so-called Rook and Queen Lifts. We use these two when we have two very special conditions. Condition number one, we cannot advance the pawns in front of our king, which means that most likely we have castled on the same side as the opponent, just like in this example. These two have castled on the same sides, and pushing the pawns in front of your king is not quite advisable as you are going to weaken your own king. And number two, which is very important actually, if you want to be successful when you're lifting, shifting pieces, you need to have space advantage. So you need to have extra space, you can easily maneuver with your pieces, you can easily bring them out in front of your pawns and start attacking, just like it is in this very famous game, which is King against Mouse. What King did was he played rook to e3, he shifted the rook all the way to g3. Sometimes he also wanted to go to h3, but in this particular case he decided to put it on g3, and the rook is ready to attack with the bishop, the queen, the knight, and even that one. He easily created devastating attack after rook c8. He played bishop h6, brought this bishop into the attack, and then he sacrificed after that on g6 to finish the game in a very nice style. Actually, the key move of his combination was the move queen to b1, after which he inserted the queen into the attack and he managed to deliver checkmate to the king. In this example, it was only white who could do the rook shift, if you notice this one, because black didn't have that much space. Even if he wants to, he cannot shift the rook on the 6th rank. On the 5th, it's too difficult as there are too many pieces attacking it and defending those squares. So, two conditions for successful rook lift: space advantage, and okay, usually we're using it when the kings have castled on the same side. It's not always the case though that we are using it when we are castling on the same side. Sometimes we can do it if the castlings are opposite, but the game that I chose for you here is the game Jabava against Galego that was played at the European Championship in Warsaw 2005. Warsaw, the capital of Poland. The opening is some old King's Indian defense. Contrary to the normal King's Indian defense, this bishop is coming on e7, the dark squared bishop, which is not as active as with a pawn on g6. And Jubava is using the typical fianchetto system, so he is quickly developing his pieces in a standard way. He is grabbing the center after that with the move e4, and he gets some slight advantage. Black is reacting also in a typical way for the King's Indian defense. c6, he takes control of the d5 square. Next, he played the move e5, and he wants to grab some more space on the queen side and to bring his knights on c5, f6 to put pressure on e4 eventually, and some pressure on the queen side. Sometimes he is looking for a way to free himself with d5. So next, what follows is quite a typical positional maneuvering. White is bringing his pieces out, black is also bringing his pieces out, and at the same time he is trying to create some threats of his own. By the way, it is white who is already creating tactical threats with this modest looking rook d1 move. If black is not careful, imagine that it was white to move. There is a typical trick knight takes c6, and after the capture, the rook is giving very good support for that bishop on c5 to regain the piece, and white is going to be clear pawn up. Galego was aware of this one though, so he played queen to b6. He defended himself. Then b3 was a novelty back in 2005. After e4, rook b1, a b3, b3, and queen b4, black is happy to open the a file in general, and also to bring his queen on b4 to create some pressure on these two. Eventually rook a3 is coming after that, and that's indeed very typical King's Indian play. However, in the usual King's Indian, there will be a bishop helping all these maneuvers. So in that particular case, Jubava had a chance to get rid of the queen with the move bishop d2. This is not the only move, by the way. Queen d2 was also very interesting, intending to get rid of the queen with the move knight to c2, followed by b4, and then the knight on c5 would be suffering. There will be either a fork with b4 or a pin after b4 of the queen goes to b6, but these are all details. It's a question of taste how exactly you're going to play. Okay, so bishop d2 is creating the threat knight to d5, after which white is going to double the pawns of the opponent. Sometimes he can also try to trap the queen, and black is pretty much forced to retreat. He played queen to b6. Now, most of the people would have gone here rook e1 to stabilize the situation in the center, to give some extra support to the pawn on e4, and then slowly, steadily, they will try to improve, maybe move away the king from this diagonal, then prepare f4, then prepare some kingside attack g4, g5, or look for a good moment to push the pawns with f5 in e5. But not Jobava. Jobava actually played in a more active, aggressive way, rook f to d1. Rook f to d1 is giving an extra support to the knight on d4, first of all, but it is also placing the rook on a more dangerous file. It is hitting the backward pawn on d6. On the other hand, though, it is a risky move as it is sacrificing a pawn. And obviously, Jobava did this on purpose. He wanted to give away this pawn. Why? We're going to see in a moment. I just want to mention that white is having advantage no matter what black plays in the situation. If, for example, bishop e6, he can, first of all, he can just take it angle b4 with the two bishops, and the space advantage he should be much better. Or he can keep on mounting pressure with bishop e3 and after queen c7 then b4, keeping more pieces on the board, and again grabbing more and more space. This is another way to prove advantage. If instead of the capture on e4, black tries knight e6, that would be bishop e3, and this would be very similar to the line that we have seen. I just have to add that these lines are given by Bruzon and Ibarra and the chess informant. And finally, if a move like g6 to finally bring this bishop into the game, into the action, that will be still b4. And here, capturing the pawn on e4 is going to be plain wrong, as after knight takes e4, knight takes e4 and bishop e3, the bishop and the knight are creating very, very unpleasant threats. Okay, so the knight was first of all defended, and now this knight on e4 is hanging, and if black tries to be tricky and capture on g3, this is where we see the knight and the bishop working in perfect harmony. White has the move knight e6. Give me the queen. It is also blocking the road of the rook, so the rook cannot sacrifice itself on e3. After that, the queen is more or less trapped. It can go to e6, but if it goes to e6, there will be knight c7, and there are too many things hanging in black's camp. And if he does queen takes e3 to sacrifice the queen, there will be insufficient compensation for the queen, even though black has two light pieces and two pawns. This is not enough in this particular case, as the knight cannot stay on some nice central outpost, and white should be winning this. But why can black capture the pawn on e4? Isn't the knight on d4 hanging after that? This was probably the question that he was asking himself during the game, and finally the Portuguese grandmaster decided there is no danger at all, and he took the pawn with knight c to e4. He discovers the role for his queen. Okay, obviously he understood that after knight e4, the immediate capture on d4 would be a mistake, as there'll be bishop c3, give me the queen has to go back, and then white is regaining the material with interest, as if black captures here, obviously he's going to lose the whole rook, and if he doesn't, he would be down a piece. So therefore, he first took on e4 with the knight, and after bishop e4, only after that he took on d4. It's pretty obvious that he understood that he is not going to win a pawn, as white can regain it immediately with bishop h7, which he did. But he was somehow happy that he managed to treat two pairs of light pieces. And normally, if you're in cramped position, you're trying to treat pieces and you're trying to reduce the pressure, just like Galig was doing. The problem here, though, is that he miscalculated or misunderstood that after bishop c3, these two bishops, they're dangerous, yes, but if they are not getting enough support, there will be no checkmate. This one Galego understood well. What he didn't understand was that after queen c5, there is support coming. And since white has extra space, something that I mentioned at the beginning, he can make good use of that by shifting a rook, lifting a rook. The rook is going to h4, and that's a very, very powerful threat. If black is not careful, if he does nothing, imagine that he is just waiting, there'll be rook h4, and next move is going to bishop g8. Bishop g6 is not bad neither, but bishop g8 is a very powerful threat. Black will have to take it, and the queen is coming to help the rook and to deliver checkmate. And there is nothing that black can do to stop this. Very, very simple idea, but at the same time, very unpleasant, and in fact, unstoppable. Except for this move, bishop e7, the only way to stop the rook. But the problem here is that there is a second rook coming, and this rook is trying to help his brother on d4 to make it to the h4 square anyway. In fact, rook h4 immediately is a threat. If they do nothing, rook h4, and black cannot capture it because rook e8 is checkmate. This rook is hanging. If black tries to capture a pawn on h3 instead of that, now the rooks are defending each other. But here we see the key idea by white that I mentioned. The rook on e1 is happy to help the one on d4 to finally reach the h4 square, and we know what happens. Anytime that the rook comes here, bishop to g8, check, followed by queen to h7, check, followed by queen f8, checkmate, is unstoppable. And if black tries to defend with a move like bishop to d7, there is first of all b4, getting rid of this defender. The queen is sometimes helping to defend on the king side, but here it doesn't have good squares. If it goes backwards on b6, we know what happens. Rook e7, rook e7, rook h4, that's a familiar line. If they do play queen to g5, then the queen is standing on the road of the bishop, and the rook can go bravely on h4. He is not afraid that the queen is going to sacrifice itself for it. And finally, if the queen goes to h5, that would be the move rook takes e7 anyway, followed by rook h4. And once again, white is winning an important tempo to, after that, either win the queen or deliver the checkmate that we were talking about. So finally, what black did in this situation was the move bishop to e6. Now at least he is happy. He is certain that this rook on e1 is not going to sacrifice itself for the one on e7. However, we mentioned this attack, yes, on the h file, but there's another file that the rook on d4 can use. This is the g file. So far, he didn't have a chance to reach the g file because this bishop was defending the square g4, but once that the bishop comes on e6, a chance occurs and white takes it. He takes the bishop on e6, he destroys it, and next move, he brings the rook on g4. The obvious threat, bishop takes g7, and this is checkmate. It's not a joke, it's very serious. And then black has two ways of defending it, either with the bishop or with the pawn. He can try to block the opponent's bishop himself. In the game, he played e5, but if he had tried to defend with the bishop, there would be still checkmate anyway. Queen to g6, give me capture on e7, and checkmate in 2. And if now e5, the queen is coming this way, and the threat is checkmate on g8. If they capture on h7, the rook, the shifted rook that we have seen it from before, is delivering the final blow, and it's going to be checkmate. And if in this line black tries to defend himself with rook to e7, then rook h4 obviously wins, and then we are going to see familiar checkmates, but this one is even flashier and even better, threatening bishop to g6 check and queen to h7 checkmate. It's also faster, so there is nothing that they can do. In this line, white managed to shift the queen to the h file from c2, and we can see that it's not only the rook that can be shifted, the queens, they're also capable of doing so. Okay, but how about the move e5, which is blocking the bishop? Now it seems like black should be capable of holding this one. He can play bishop f6, and if he is given time, he can even try to convert his extra material. He's up the exchange and seemingly stable. Actually, he is not stable at all. The light squares are very weak. The queen is coming on g6. The threat is, again, checkmate. And we know what happens in case of bishop f8. We have seen it before. There will be still queen to f7, give me this checkmate. If they take this checkmate, rook h4. And if they don't take, if they move away the bishop, the checkmate is coming on g7. So this is not helping. But then the only other thing left is bishop to f6. Once again, it seems for a moment that he is capable of defending everything. Now, queen h5 though is probably just a win, but there is an even better one, which is opening the road for the heavy pieces. The threat is queen to h7 checkmate. If the rook takes, the king is going to get blocked, and the checkmate is coming on the h-file. And if they take with the king, then the king is standing on the spin, and it would be again the queen and the rook, which will deliver checkmate on g7. These two are furious, and their enormous attacking power. There is nothing that black can do, and he resigned actually after the move bishop g8. To summarize the things that we have seen, the rook lifts and the queen shifts on the king side, on the queen side, very, very common when the kings have castled on the same side, and one of the sides is having extra space when they have extra mobility for their pieces on that side of the board where you're shifting the pieces. Besides the positions with the isolated pawns, I want to mention some more. In the Sicilians, we are using the rook shifts very often, especially when we have opposite castling attacks, and in some closed pawn chains, like in the French, the Caracan, whenever the pawn chains are closed and we have a clear object for the attack, either the king's or the queen's side, and then we're using the rook shifts as well. Thank you for your attention. I'll see you next time.